Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's District Administration web seminar entitled Bridging the Digital Equity Gap for Remote Learning, which is brought to you by the generous support of our sponsors, Acer for Education and Google for Education. Before we get underway, I'd like to share a few housekeeping items. For technical support, use the chat panel on the right side of your screen, select my name, Stephen Blackburn, and type your message if you're having any technical issues. If you don't have computer speakers, or if you prefer to listen privately, you can please dial the phone number and access code that I'll be posting in the chat window, which you'll see in a few minutes. We will also be welcoming any questions you have today with a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. To submit a question, please feel free to use the Q&A panel at the bottom right side of your screen and send your questions to all panelists, which is the default option. If you don't see the chat or the Q&A panels, look to the right of your screen and click the expand triangle, which you should be able to find in front of the panel name to make sure you have access to it. Also, last thing, something important to note, if you would like to access the web seminar at a later time, everyone who registered and who is attending today will receive an email with a link to the slide and an archive recording. And with that, it is my pleasure to introduce to you all our speaker today, Monica Davis. Monica is a CIO of DeKalb County School District in Georgia. Hello, Monica. It's great to have you with us today.
Hello. How's everyone doing? Shall I go ahead and get started, or?
Definitely, all you.
Okay, thank you. It's great to be in community with everyone today. Today's topic is bridging the equity for remote learning. I'm Monica Davis, and as you mentioned, I'm the Chief Information Officer for the DeKalb County School District. During this presentation, I'll share our journey as a school district, as well as discuss where we were, and I'll say pre-COVID. What we had to do once, COVID hit, as we all had to shift and adjust, and what we had to do to measure our progress to ensure that we were on target, and also what's next for reentry, because that is something that is going to happen eventually. So where are we going? So I will cover those areas during this presentation. Before we get into the nitty-gritty, I really want to share a little bit about our school district and give you some perspective as it pertains to the lens that we're looking at this challenge for our school district. Our school district has roughly 98,957 students. We have about 6,600 teachers, 139 schools and centers. About 108 of our schools and centers are Title I schools. We're at about 73% free and reduced lunch with about 27,000 international students. We have over 150 countries represented, and we speak over 178 languages, so much so that the top 15 of those languages we are mandated to translate for our families to ensure that we can effectively communicate as a school district. If you notice on the map, if you're wondering just for perspective where DeKalb County is, we are in the metropolitan or greater Atlanta, Georgia area, and Atlanta is made up of two counties. Fulton, there are two counties that that make up Atlanta, and that is Fulton County to the west and DeKalb County to the east. And so that's a little bit about our school district. So vision and goal. As a community, the development of our strategic plan was definitely a grassroots effort. Our entire community contributed, and we had to agree on what direction we were going as a community. And as you can see, our vision is to inspire our community of learners to achieve educational excellence. In our goal area, the very first goal area, there are 5, is student success with equity and access. Now, what's important is more than ever, we'll notice that and we understand that a lack of digital access is a lack of access to education. And I'm sure everyone on this call can understand that. I've given this, I presented this particular slide and this particular perspective about 2.5 years ago, and people were saying, "Man, okay," there was some talk back and forth and tugging back and forth. But I think everyone can understand how definitely a lack of digital access is definitely a lack of access to education. So as a school district, and understanding our demographics, you can understand how for us that was a major, major concern as to how we were going to move forward, because it was a priority for our district because we're looking at ensuring that all of our students have access to education. Now, when you look at our technology plan, for us as a school district and from our strategic plan, obviously your technology plan must be aligned with your strategic plan in order for it to meet the needs of your organization. And for our school district, the strategic plan goals, we have 5 goals, and they're very simple visual goals. The goals of our strategic plan our technology plan was to ensure that with these 5 goals that we were definitely addressing the key areas that we need to address with the technology infrastructure that we had in our school district. How are we going to use technology into the DeKalb County School District, and how does that transformation look in DeKalb County, the digital transformation look in the DeKalb County School District? But for us, I've participated on several iterations of our technology plan, and in this one of the things we wanted to do is ensure that the focus was definitely on teaching and learning. It always is, but we wanted to really make a statement with that. So our very first technology plan goal is the empowered learning environment for our students. And as you notice, the other 4 goals, data governance, community partnerships, professional learning, and of course, infrastructure enhancements, they're there to provide wraparound support to the one goal, which is our empowered learning environment. And that's really important because for us, it's important that we are able to provide that digital equity and that learning environment for all of our students. So when you look at the empowered learning environment, we're looking at cultivating and supporting a constantly accessible learning environment. If you notice, the words that are read are the words that I share and remind our staff, which is IT, and the rest of the district for that matter, but for our staff, as I'm talking and reminding us of our work, constantly accessible. So you're looking at the infrastructure. This environment has to be constantly accessible. And it's a learning environment. It has to be supported by innovative technology, and it has to encourage all students, we're going back to our digital equity, to be active, creative, knowledgeable, ethical participants in our globally connected society. So for us as a school district, we started out quite some time ago with this in mind and with digital equity in the forefront of our minds. So as we started with digital equity as a priority for our school district, we had to look at what were going to be the top 3 priorities in order to ensure that we were able to achieve digital equity. And so those priorities are technology access, ensuring we have access to the technology, digital curriculum and content, as well as digital literacy and citizenship. Technology access for us, obviously that's where we all are, making sure everyone has access to a device, everyone's connected to the internet. So for us, we started a technology initiative called Digital Dreamers. And so you see the logo with the D and the pixelation kind of trailing at the end. That is our Digital Dreamers logo for our school district. And our strategy was to expand the district's digital footprint because we knew that not enough students had access to the technology just to begin with, the tools. So we started out with grades 6 to 12, 1 device per student, and in grades pre-K through 5, 1 device per 2 students. We also looked and provided internet connectivity for students in need, and we focused on high school. We had a partnership with the Sprint 1 Million project, and so we provided this, and this is really for homework. So, really expanding learning beyond our school walls. And so because when they were in our school, of course, we had the infrastructure in place for them to be able to connect to the internet and use it appropriately in the school district. So we adopted several tools to create a systemic virtual learning environment because you can have all the devices you want. You can be connected to the internet, but what are you connecting to? So that was our next step. So we created this virtual learning environment, which I'll show a little bit about next in the next slide. And then we looked at the fact that the sustainability of this infrastructure, of our technology infrastructure with these new devices really has to become a major focus. It always has been, but we really had to now because if there is, especially in this environment, if they don't work, then the child is not learning. and not having access to that instruction. But in terms of our digital footprint expansion, this kind of gives you an understanding of what we did as a school district. We ended up with 24,969 Chromebooks for elementary school. For our one-to-one, we had 38,819 of our students. We rolled out that many Chromebooks. If you look at the hotspots, we rolled out almost 8,000 hotspots. And then there's some other benchmarks that we measured as well in terms of wireless access points. We installed 8,095, soon to be over 10,000. And then, of course, we also measured how many logins just to log into our environment so we could see how many students are actually accessing our environment, which gave us a benchmark as to whether or not, all of this was working. So that gave us a little bit about our first priority, ensuring that our students had access to the technology. Now, our second priority talked about digital curriculum and content. So at the same time we were doing this with Digital Dreamers, we also had what we called our district, our digital curriculum strategy. So at the same time, our Division of Curriculum and Instruction, they were developing a district what we call a living and breathing curriculum. But, every curriculum, especially nowadays, has to have a digital strategy. How are you going to share the curriculum, especially if it's living and breathing, which to us means it's being updated as it needs to be updated, and you're not having big binders and take out this page and put in this page and, and so on and so forth. What is the digital strategy? So we did develop a digital strategy where we're able to share it. Curriculum instruction can make changes as needed, and teachers see it in live. And so we adopted several tools to create a systemic virtual learning environment, and we also identified digital content and instructional materials and worked together. But I want to talk about this virtual learning environment. So this is my just anal retentiveness, I guess you could say. For me, I was, at the time that this was developed, I was the director of virtual learning for the school district. Can relate. Well, we had all of these tools, but to me there was no flow in terms of what does this look like for us as we make decisions for our students. So what we did was we sat down, we mapped out our virtual learning environment for Digital Dreamers. What are we accessing? What do our tools look like? And this is a very basic view of it. And of course, you have your student information system, our learning management system. We use It's Learning. Our student information system, we use Infinite Campus. And basically, as you can see, those two systems work very, very closely together, pushing the user and course rosters, pushing out grades. We use another tool called Illuminate for our assessments. And then down below, you see all of the tools that we use in the school district to support learning, whether it be productivity tools, as well as our external content that I just talked about. So this was a huge part, just really, I call it corralling these digital learning tools and just making sure that that we are very clear. We were very clear as a school district. So this is the work that we did with that piece. The third piece was, so now you have the devices, you have you're connected, you have your tools, you have your digital curriculum strategy, but is your staff, are your students, and is your community prepared to leverage all of that you've given them, because that's the next piece. So we really had to work on digital literacy and citizenship for those three groups. And I'll repeat them: staff, of course, our students, and then, of course, our parents and community. So we wanted to train them on how to leverage that expanded digital footprint that we put in place to be able to leverage our investment, but also meet the needs of our students as a community. So one of the things that we put into place is Ignite You, which is our professional learning community for our staff. And this is really, how do you move 8,000 instructional staff members from one phase to the next? I'll admit, you see the red dot that says you are here and you're proficient. We were on the other side of basic. We didn't know what tools we had. We didn't know, which ones we should be using. As a team, individually, we knew there were silos, but there was no systemic connection there. So as we looked and as we moved forward, we were able to see that, we need to come up with a plan and a way to move our staff, to tell them how do you know you're basic? You're aware of these tools that are adopted by the district. I know how to use them. Okay, so now I have to move you to proficient, because we need you to be proficient. Everyone must be proficient with these tools. And this is, how do you make, you're able to make these effective decisions and integrate technology to enhance learning. So that's what everyone needs to be. And then, of course, advanced, these are our tech rock stars, our teachers who are just, and you have them in every school district who just love this. They just absorb it, and they come back with all of these awesome ideas, but they have to be willing to share it, and we call those fuses. So that would be, we also have what we call our tech cafes for our parents, and then for digital dreamers for the entire initiative, we have all types of digital dreamer hubs and experiences that are created for these students from professional learning such as Ignite U. So that was our approach pre-COVID. Now, everything I just told you. Then, of course, on March 16th, we happened to have the shift, which many of us had the shift. And that's when we were told, okay, everyone has to go home, and now we're really getting ready to test everything we put into place to see if it worked, because we had to look at how we're going to reopen, what we're going to do. This is before we reopened, but what this is going to look like for our teachers. And I will say for us as a school district, we made a substantial investment in our framework and in our virtual learning environment as well as our digital footprint, and they paid off. It was not perfect. We did have some challenges, but for the most part, it made a huge difference. First of all, our priorities did not change. As you can see, your priorities still remain the same. And these priorities would apply to any organization. You had to make sure they had access to devices and connected to the internet. They had to have the curriculum, whether they're supposed to be learning, the content, where to go get the content and the learning experience. And the teachers had to really understand how to make this come alive for the students and to also meet the needs, the learning needs, because this is a little different. You don't have them in front of you now. They're at home, and so now you have a totally different set. The ballgame has changed completely for our teachers. And of course, and now they're with the parents, so that digital citizenship and literacy were critical. I would say as a district, this is the area that we definitely had to do a lot of work in. In terms of device readiness, which is that first priority, we ended up assessing over 73,000 student Chromebooks in 3 weeks. So we had to send, our technicians went out to assess our student Chromebooks, but for us, we had the almost 40,000 devices checked out to our students in grades 6 through 12. We did not collect those because due to the social distancing protocols and that we were in, we didn't collect those devices. So we had all of these students with devices that we couldn't get our hands on to assess to ensure that they were ready for the new school year. So we had to train our students how to assess their devices. And so we had a massive campaign with the older students to teach them exactly how they were to assess their device to ensure they were ready for learning. Again, expanding that digital literacy for our students. 69% of our students, we found after we did all of the work and checked in with all of our families, had access to a district-provided device. And we ended up purchasing an additional 29,000 Chrome OS devices. And I say Chrome OS because, as you all know, purchasing a device became almost, it was just a game of, not thrones, but a massive game trying to get a hold of these devices because everyone was purchasing them and everyone was responding. We are standardized on Acer's Chromebook. And so they were our partner, and so they were able to assist us with providing these Chrome OS devices to us so that we can and keep our operating system the same. That was huge because we had to be able to assist all of these people in all of these remote situations, and so we didn't want to change our environment too much. So we were able to do that. Of course, internet connectivity, talk about that, how important that was, and one of our priorities. But now we're not just giving them hotspots just for students who were high school students. We had to look at pre-K through 12, and we had to shift from the student to providing for the household, because now you had big brother, it may be in high school, little brother is in elementary school, you may have, the middle child in middle school. And so, but they're all using the same hotspots. So we had to work to select a hotspot that was able to support that type of use from families. So we created what we call Connected Digital Dreamer Initiative. And so far we've provided hotspots to over 22,152 households, because we have some households who just had no connectivity. And counting, we're still providing households with support. And, of course, we have to still make sure that SIPA compliant. Filters still has to be in place because we're still a school district and we're still liable and responsible for making sure our students can't get to that content that they shouldn't. But we also have to look at monitoring use for ROI and return of investment and your value of investment. Return on investment, as you know, is more short term. So looking at, did they use the hotspot? If they didn't use the hotspot, then that tells us that we have to figure out, it helps us to make decisions next year when it's time to renew the service on these devices. And so that is a space that I live in making sure that we're making the best decisions there. But your value of investment is long term. So is this what we want to do for the next 5 to 10 years? And so that's where we are right now in terms of assessing that piece of it. There are many other innovative ways to address this than using the hotspot, but those are areas and avenues that we're working with our vendor partners to determine what's the best way to approach this year after year after year. Because we do understand that this has changed education forever, and we know that, and anticipating that, we're trying to determine what is this going to look like for us as a school district. But we were able to provide that internet connectivity support. The next thing we had to assess was our virtual learning systems readiness. So remember I talked about that virtual learning environment? We had to make sure that it was ready to go day one. Before, it was pretty much ready to go. If there were a few tweaks or things we had to turn, we still could work on it because, first day of school, the kids are there and teachers are working with them. Well, no, first day of school relies on the environment. So we didn't have that leeway to make that decision. So we had to make sure this was up. All of these systems were up and ready to go the first day of school. I will say that what you're looking at is just the tools that we standardize on as a district because it made sense at that time. But we do allow our teachers, for example, we have a substantial number of teachers who use Google Classroom as well as Google Meet. And so because we are a Google Chrome district as it pertains to our students, those tools are available to them. So we wanted to make it as easy for our staff as possible in terms of supporting those environments. But as you can see, this is from our website. You can see the website itself if you want to go visit it. This is a learning support site that we keep updated and keep information in, and they can learn how to log in. Parents can know what to do. All the questions that parents were asking from March to May, we addressed in this website. And so that was the next thing we had to do. Of course, digital content and curriculum. We had our digital curriculum. It was already available. As I mentioned earlier, our strategy was in place. And where to get those tools and what you should be teaching, down to the 3-part lesson plan that curriculum instruction wanted them to focus on and the various strategies that they were putting into place. But we all have to collaborate, curriculum instruction, the regional offices, which is responsible for school leadership, as well as school support and intervention. This is our counselors, psychologists, et cetera, all of those support wraparound services. But we looked at how we're going to purchase, whether we would purchase, curate, and how we would share content, because this is a big piece. One thing we found was that, and you all probably found the same thing, there are teachers who are excellent at facilitating virtual learning, but they're not very good at curating the content for virtual learning. So just trying to, as a team, figure that piece out. And so we had to do that work. And last, again, when we look at our priorities for digital equity as a district, we addressed literacy, more work with literacy and citizenship. As I mentioned, Ignite U was already in place. So it was just really expanding the webinars, really focusing on those skills and making sure they understood how to use the tools that we had. And it was a lot of, first the teachers would come and I would say they would come with their hair on fire and, I don't know what I'm doing. And then we would say, okay, remember when we had this session and remember when we taught you this? And they would say, oh, I remember that. So it was a lot of that for our teachers, aha moments that really assisted them because of Ignite U that was already in place. So that helped us tremendously because we had that framework in place. Also, for focus on digital leadership, that was an area that we were working on anyway. But digital leadership means, so all of our focus had really been on teachers and making sure they knew what to do in the classroom. But digital leadership was something, how do I lead in this environment? Where are my priorities? What, and not only just from a teaching and learning perspective, as a digital leader, you have to have a little bit of me inside of you as well, from a chief information officer perspective and from infrastructure perspective in your school, understanding what that looks like and, with the kids being at home versus, some teachers maybe coming to the building working, and how does that work? Just a little bit, not as much. So we had to really work with our digital leaders to get them to understand how they manage the distribution of devices, and what happens if they need to reset their password, things like that. Our principals really hadn't had to deal with. And so we had to really work with them on that piece of it. And not only the principals, but our regional superintendents, helping their principals and guiding them through it. So a lot of work on digital leadership was done and to come. That's actually very important for me. That's very important to me as we move forward, because I think that overall digital leadership is where a lot of work can be done to assist our leaders in leading in this environment. But we also have to expand our tech cafe. That's our opportunities for our parents. But if you notice, I had here the village, because as you all know, mom and dad sometimes have to go to work. And so you could have auntie, you could have grandma or granddad or whomever, Miss So-and-so down the street. You can have all of these wonderful people who are part of this child's village who are helping these children to learn, but they'd had no idea how to use the tool, how to turn on the Chromebook, et cetera. So we hosted several large webinars so that our communities, anyone in the community, we advertised it to everyone so they could, log in and see how to use our tools and understand how to help the students, because this truly was an all-hands-on-deck village approach to move forward. We still have work to do. None of this has been perfect, but it did work, and we did have a head start. So we did see a lot of progress for us. So how did we do? You look at the numbers, and if you look at our virtual learning environment that I was talking about, accessing it, so that means you have to have the device, you have to be connected to the internet, right? And so, and we have an environment that they actually access. So about 93,933, and this was the numbers at that time. Our numbers are fluctuating. I'm sure everyone's experiencing that too with this situation. But 83,000 of those students, almost 84,000 logged in. So almost 90% of our students are accessing our virtual learning environment. And actually, it's higher than this. It's at 93 now. And so we're able to see who logged in, who has not logged in. We give them to the principals and to the regionals, and they give it to the teachers and the counselors, and we go and find out, why can't you log in? What's going on? So we did that work too. But we were very pleased that this many of our students were able to at least access it, whether it was with a district device or with their own device. Of course, Verge, which is our learning management system, that's where most of the learning is taking place, 71%, and now we're at about 74% of our students are actively engaged. Each session that they log in, they're spending about an hour and 21 minutes. And this ranges from kindergarten all the way to high school. So oh my gosh, kindergarten isn't spending that much time. It's an average across for all students. But as you can see, as a district, we fared pretty well here as well. We're very pleased with this data. So what's next for us? And with this, reentry for us is definitely it's a reality. We all are going to have to reenter at some point. But as I mentioned, technology has changed. It's changed education forever. I believe that, and I can't wait to see what it looks like for education. I'm very excited about that piece of it. From a technical perspective, looking at how the infrastructure is going to support the learning, which is really the core piece. But for us, most immediately, we need to look at how technology is going to support a hybrid learning environment as opposed to a remote learning environment. Because now, most of us are talking about some students coming in. We're giving some students the opportunity to continue to learn virtually. And so with that being the case, my job is to ensure that the infrastructure and the tools that we have supports any situation, which is hybrid is where you want to be. But I will tell you this, if you can support a remote environment, you can certainly support a hybrid learning environment. But that's the work that we're doing now, just looking at what those protocols look like and what are the expectations. I'll give you an example. One of the students in another district, one of our leaders in IT, she was saying her daughter had gone back to school, and she said like 3 kids in her class, but there were children online, and the teacher was talking and teaching the three of them and the children online at the same time. And she was saying they were confused as to who are they talking to? Are they talking to us? Well, that's something as educators that we have to look at. And as a technologist, that's something I have to work with our chief for curriculum instruction, our chief academic officer. She and I are working on looking at, okay, so what needs to happen as we work with the regional superintendents and all of leadership and our teachers to determine how do we deal with that? You know, what do the protocols look like? What type of equipment can support that? So those are hard decisions that we're trying to make, and that's just one example. And again, what devices will we allow on our network? We have students who want to bring their own device to school. So we do have a BYOD network, and they will be allowed to bring devices to school, but we will tell them which devices for security of the network, et cetera, and just, making sure that they also have the tools that they need. So you can't bring your Nintendo Switch or, something like that and put it on the network and use that as your device. We know that we'll have to provide them with the device if they can't use that, because for some students, that's what they had. And then, of course, the infrastructure configuration and enhancements that are necessary to handle additional devices. We added 30,000 new devices to our network. And so now as they're coming in to our district, what is that going to look like with our infrastructure? Luckily for us, our infrastructure is pretty solid. We sit on about 272 miles of sub-provision fiber. We own our fiber network. All of our centers and schools are connected. And we are also looking at some resilient redundancy to add some lit fiber as well to ensure that, we could travel from building to building, but also once we get into the building, looking at what that looks like. The local area networks within each building, what does that infrastructure look like? Looking at our wireless access points, what do they look like? How are they processing, and are they configured appropriately to be able to now handle all of these devices when everyone comes back to school at one time? So those are the types of conversations that we are having and that we are actively trying to resolve at this time in anticipation of our students returning. We can't wait for them to return, but we want to be prepared for them as well. So that is all that I have for today. I hope I was able to provide some great information for someone.
No, definitely. Well, thank you very much, Monica, for your insights on this important subject for sure. So now, the part of this presentation, we're going to now go into a Q&A, where Monica will, answer any questions you may have. So for those in the audience, who have not yet submitted a question, please do so now by submitting it in the Q&A panel, which should be located below the chat panel at the bottom of your screen. So hopefully we'll get to all your questions if we have time. So let's see what we have here. One question is, were you able, it just jumped away from me. Were you able to take advantage of the CARES Act for funding technology? And if so, can you please explain that process maybe in some detail?
Absolutely. As a school district, as I mentioned, our goal was to first assess what the needs were, because for us, CARES Act funding wasn't just used strictly for technology. When it first came out, it was just for technology because everyone was struggling with technology, but it wasn't. At least in our district, it wasn't. It was to be used across the board. So we had to have some serious conversations and courageous conversations and determine what our needs were. So we did a needs assessment. And for us, we focused on devices and we focused on connectivity. So our CARES Act funding for our technology needs, the technology component of that was used to purchase the devices that I talked about, as well as to purchase the internet hotspots for our students to be able to use.
Perfect. Thank you. We have another question that came in. How are you able to tell which of your students did not log into sessions?
Okay, so that's a great question. We looked at that from a myriad of angles. Very straightforward, though. Your most, 180-degree angle, straight line. One of the things that we did is we looked at our Active Directory and just the authentication. the authentication process itself, and we could tell because to get to many of our applications to Federated ADFS, utilizing ADFS. So we knew once they logged in that we could see whether or not they were hitting some of those, those applications. And so if we noticed that there were students who never logged in, because it gives you a report, and it'll tell you the last time they logged in. If they never logged in, then we contacted them. And we even went as far as to say if they didn't log in by, we started school on August the 17th. So I wasn't really interested in anyone who logged in before the 17th. I wanted to know who logged in from August 17th up until whatever period, as I would periodically provide these reports. And so from there, we were able to see and able to tell which students were not logging in. But that really doesn't tell you whether or not they were engaged. And it just says they logged in. They could have logged in and logged back out. But that's where we work with the regional superintendents and with our teachers. And with that, and the principals, and with that piece of it, they were able to look and work with their schools and have the teachers look at what was actually going on. So, like I mentioned, the majority of our district is using Verge, which for us is It's Learning. That's the name of the tool. But they were also using Google Classroom as well. So there were 3 areas that were being, requested for the regional superintendents that were also utilized to determine our my thought is fleeting from me, but at the beginning of the year, the first 10 days, your 10-day warm body count, that's what we call, to make sure, students who didn't show up for school. So we utilized all of those opportunities to collect data to look and see what students were doing. So teachers had to provide feedback. As this child, are they logging in? Did they turn anything in? Have you seen them? Another piece was utilizing the video chat to make sure that, hey, I need you. I'm taking attendance every morning. I know my son, his teacher takes attendance every morning, and you have to, she wants to see you say here, and you can turn it back off. So we were utilizing every strategy we could to account for ourselves, but also looking at the instructional components as well to see what they were actually doing. So we pulled all of that together to determine what engagement looked like for our school, for our district.
Perfect. Thank you. Another question that just came in. What to you are the top features you look for in a digital curriculum?
Wow. That question, I'm going to approach it from my perspective, because really that is really a question, I think, for our Chief Academic Officer. But I will tell you this. For us, it has to be something that was, of course, aligned to what the standards that it needed to be aligned to, but also we wanted as a district something that was relevant to our students. As I mentioned, our students, and that was culturally responsible. We are a very diverse district. We wanted to ensure that it was full of resources and full of I guess you could say digital resources and up to date, relevant, authentic resources to really promote that type of learning in our students. And for me, something that was able to be captured and delivered and monitored as well as modified easily, so that we could make sure as an IT division that we were able to ensure our teachers and our students and parents had access to the curriculum. But those would be the areas that I know we look for and we discussed. But in terms of a much better answer, definitely our Chief Academic Officer, Ms. Stacey Stephanie, she could speak to it way better than I can.
Thank you very much. We have another question that came in, very intense topic. How has remote learning been for your special ed students? How has it improved from the perspective of improving access and curriculum?
Special education students, we definitely had to prioritize that group, obviously, because and looking at the IEPs, what was required in the IEPs, they did a lot of work with special education with the Division of Curriculum and Instruction, as well as the schools, to determine what tools they needed to learn what they needed to learn. We started out a little rocky at the beginning, and parents were very concerned, and I know that it wasn't just us. As I kind of looked and read and saw that special education was one of those areas, it has gotten better with our virtual learning environment. We were able to leverage several of the tools to support our special education students. acceptable accommodations, as well as, just looking at just what the needs and what the requests of the IEPs are for our students. So we have seen definitely some progress there. We still have a long way to go, and we're still working with that piece of it. But definitely seeing some progress. There's a myriad of tools that can be used to support special education and the needs of special education in some of those areas. And I think that the one thing I will say is that our teachers are discovering those tools and being able to see them in a new light. So that is happening too in our district. But work in progress for us as a school district.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Another question, what was your biggest challenge, as you initiated virtual learning environments, especially when it comes to, teachers, and how are you able to help these teachers?
When you said virtual learning environments, for us, remember it started well before COVID. So we're talking about as a result of the COVID situation, or well before when we first started? District?
COVID, definitely.
COVID. For us, the biggest thing for us was really ensuring, first of all, that everyone had a device. So that was the biggest thing. But the other piece of that is kind of calming everyone down and getting them to understand you have a lot of the tools that you need. For our teachers, for example, I mentioned earlier, those aha moments are just really reactivating their understanding of what we have been teaching them for 4 years. And getting them to see that and seeing how now it's more relevant to them, because now you have to put what you've learned into action, and the stakes are really high. So once the teachers started to realize that piece of it, that I think was the biggest piece. The other piece, of course, was support, providing the support for the students. I'll tell on us. Our first week of school in IT, we answered over 7,000 calls, but we dropped 10 because I was looking at the data. And a lot of that had to do with, again, looking at digital leadership, we had to look at the type of calls. All calls were coming to us. And so, just kind of making those decisions and providing them with the support that they need, ensuring that parents' communication, ensuring that parents knew where to go for assistance. And once we were able to provide them, okay, go to this website, which is the virtual learning support site that we sent, and look, you're going to find, if you don't find the answer to your question, then give us a call. But we are confident that many of your questions you'll find the answers to, and you'll be able to log in. So that was the piece. For us, our top calls were can't log in to the tools, and then can't see my classes, and that had a lot to do with the scheduling at the schools, because they were still working on that piece of it, and they're working from home. So, just trying to get everyone to understand it's not going to show up in the tool until they're scheduled in our student information system. So, just really for us, the biggest thing beyond just making sure everyone had access to devices and connectivity is really just getting them to understand where we were, and that we do have these processes and protocols in place, and reminding them of just connecting dots for them. That's the best way I can put it, the summary. We had to really work hard to connect dots for a lot of our community.
Thank you for that, for sure. We have another question that came in. They were asking for if you could provide more guidance, on how your district created videos for your tech cafe. So, for example, did you create videos specifically, or were most of the videos purchased from companies like Google Classroom, for instance?
No, our videos were curated. So our instructional technology department partnered with our family engagement department. And so family engagement worked with the parents to say, okay, what do you not know? Because they had their finger on the pulse of the needs of the parent. And then they came to us and said, hey, these are the top issues. Can we create videos around this? And so, for example, the very first video was an introduction to the virtual learning environment, and just kind of explaining to the parents, this is the environment, this is what we're working with, this is how you log in. This is this is Launchpad, which is where all of your child's tools are. This is how, they, access Verge. This is what Verge is, a learning management system. This is probably where you're going to see your child's assignments. However, your teacher may be using Google Classroom. So this is how you would log into Google Classroom, and this is where they would see those assignments. So it was those types of things. This is how you utilize the web conferencing tools, whichever one they're using. This is live instruction is going to be important because that's how they're going to take attendance. They need to see your child and make sure, your child is well, present, and accounted for. So really having that introductory conversation, that's an example of what one of the tech cafes we had. But it was done using one of our web conferencing tools, and we recorded it. So once we recorded it, we made it available for our parents to look. So if you missed it, you can still go back and view the whole thing. So that's really how we created our videos, I guess you could say. We do some screencasting, and screencasting is really just scripted. I'm going to cover this topic. It's like a mission. I'm going to get in, cover this topic, and get out, and they can look at those pieces of it. We do some of that, but in this case, we wanted parents to be able to talk back to us and tell us, if we're talking, I'm lost, I still don't get it, because what we needed to happen is for our parents to understand what we were doing. And also for our parents to tell us what you're doing is not helping me, so we can regroup. So that's why we had live sessions and then recorded them.
Perfect. Thanks again. And it looks like that was our final question. So I'd just like to say, Monica, thank you again for letting us be a part of what has really been an inspiring discussion, and for your time and expertise. We really appreciate it, and our audience especially. And, with that, I would just like to thank our attendees for joining us today as well. For those of you who enjoyed our presentation today, there are many more upcoming web seminars like this one that are provided by District Administration, which is the leader in editorial coverage of news, trends, and current issues in K-12. Our wide range of readers here at DA, they subscribe for free to District Administration, and they stay up to date with us through our print magazine, the digital edition of our print magazine, as well as our newsletters and web seminars like this one. Also, one last thing to note, for those of you who would like to watch this web seminar again, or for those of you who believe that the solutions that Monica provided to us today in this web seminar would be helpful to your colleagues, you'll be pleased to know that an archive recording of this web seminar will be available at the URL that you can see on your screen. And you can also expect to receive an email from our team later today or early tomorrow, which will include a link to all of the slides that you saw today. And with that, I would just like to say on behalf of District Administration, this is Stephen Blackburn. Thanks, everyone, and have a great school year. Take care. Thank you again, Monica.